Welcome to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano from Feliciano Financial Group. In this podcast, brothers and certified financial planner professionals, Jose and Jeff, explain that money is just a tool to achieve the things you want in life, a tool to make the decision to live life on purpose. They draw from years of experience to demonstrate that when your money aligns with your goals, you can live a purposeful life. Because when your vision is clear, your decision is easy.
Hello and welcome to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. If you're just joining us and you have not heard the previous podcast, you're going to want to go back and listen to it. You don't have to listen to it before this one, but the guys covered good financial habits, some things that you really need to know, you really want to know. But again, don't turn this one off to go listen to the other one because this one is bad financial habits that we want to avoid. Gentlemen, I'm so glad to be back with you. I know that there's probably some things on this list I've done. So here we go. You guys ready?
Absolutely.
You bet. No doubt about it.
All right. Bad financial habits. Hit me. I know that I will admit all my mistakes here on air right now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to disclose all that. But what's the first one? If we're going to put these in order, what's one of the things that we need to cover right off the bat?
Well, first of all, don't feel bad. I mean, we all make terrible decisions. We're all human. We make terrible decisions. Some are more costly than others. But, at the end of the day, we want to balance out the bad and the good, right? So if we're making good decisions, as long as we're not making too many bad decisions, and we're fine. But these are just some things to be aware of, some things that we tend to see over time that kind of hurts us all, especially when we're unclear about where we are, where we're going, what the plan is for the future, and so forth. But I think the biggest one that we all have, especially, I don't know if you ever saw that Social Network, the Facebook type movie, when they do the algorithms and how they know exactly where you are, what you're looking at through Google and Facebook and all the big tech companies. And I think if you think about it, we're all emotional people, right? We're very impulsive. We want what we want. We want what we think we may need. But there is a big difference between what we want and what we need. And if you think about society these days, I think the reality is everything is now. If you want something, you can buy it now. I mean, if I want to play a song, I can have it playing in about 22 seconds. If I want to buy a refrigerator, I can pop on Amazon, and I don't really have to do a whole lot. I can just click a few buttons, and I can watch or see or buy anything I want. And sad enough, even if I don't have the money, I can just put it on a card and buy it. So thinking through, do I need it, or is it something that I want? So it makes it tough, but I think that's probably the biggest decision or the biggest mistake or bad habit that we have is we tend to get too impulsive. I remember in college, I wasn't able to go to spring break. We were going to Padre Island, or a bunch of people were. I couldn't because I didn't have any money. However, Mr. Discover card came in the mail with a $500 limit, and boy, I was the happiest college kid you've ever seen because there was my spring break.
I don't know about anybody else out there, but man, I can justify a purchase, right? And so my wife and I both deal with this. I can justify pretty much any tool purchase, and she can justify just about any kitchen gadget purchase. And we're terrible accountability partners for each other because I just nod, right? I'm like, oh yeah, you totally need that. Just because I know there's a tool that I'm going to need very soon, right? It's a bad habit for sure. So I'm glad you started with that one because I'm raising my hand as guilty. And another thing that I was thinking about, and I think you guys have touched on this before, is the whole keeping up with the Joneses. When the three of us were kids, keeping up with the Joneses was like our neighbors. Right? But with social media and everything that the generations are inundated with now, it's not just keeping up with your neighbors. There's this pressure to keep up with these influencers and all these people that are they're not even real, right? Anyway, that's just my opinion. But boy, trying to keep up is tough.
It's hard. I mean, there's always someone better looking, taller, more successful, has more things, a nicer car, a nicer house. But, to a certain degree, you just got to find where you are, what makes you comfortable, and just really just think through and be on the same page with your spouse of what you need. A little trick, we try to, and we're terrible at it. But, if you could, next time you want to buy something, if you can just give yourself a day, maybe 2 days, And then, all right, any big purchase, it's over a certain amount of dollars. You know what? We're not just going to impulsively buy it. We're going to wait 2 days, and then we're going to see how we feel. And if we still need it, then maybe we'll buy it.
Yep. And one thing that we've done, and we kind of stopped doing this about a year or two ago. We've gotten a lot better at our impulse type purchases, but we put in place for a little while, guys, we would actually, if we saw something, because again, you mentioned Amazon, and there's so many companies that'll get you something the next day, which is just crazy to me. But we would actually make ourselves go to the bank, pull out the cash, go back to the house, and then hold the cash in our hands and just kind of lay it out. Okay, do we really want to spend this money, right? Because if it's the card, it's just a click away. If it's cash in my hand, then I'm like, okay, this is actually a lot of money. Right? This is a whole different thing.
You know, I think as we went through this pandemic, we kind of all had a reset. I think a lot of us were chasing the Joneses and trying to keep up, but we've realized that what's really important to us. So I think a lot of people, when they get the raise, another mistake, when people get their raises, instead of them maybe saving more or building an emergency fund, they go out and spend it and they buy a new car, but they look at the monthly payment, but they don't realize that they're going to pay on that car for 10 years or 7 years or 6 years. And it's a huge mistake, and people trying to keep up with, and what to do with your raises. If you could just stay disciplined and just say, hey, look, I'm going to put that towards my 401k and my retirement or something else that you can to reposition those funds. But that's a common mistake, especially when you get raises, because you are getting that paycheck a little at a time. If you could save a little at a time, you'd be surprised at how much that'll accumulate. So that's a huge.
Now, Jose, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to challenge you on that, because when somebody gets a raise, it kind of feels good because we've worked hard and we made the next level kind of thing, and we kind of want to reward ourselves. So is there, besides just throwing everything into the 401k or investing, and is there a strategy that can kind of help us reward ourselves too? Because
well, I mean that's a fact, and so sometimes you want to consider splitting the raise, something for 2 purposes or 3 purposes or whatever the case may be. But the common mistake is just go ahead and spending everything that you make and the raises that you get, and then it just affects tomorrow, and then you're back to keeping up with the Joneses, and then you realize it's just not as important as you thought it was.
Yeah, and I would think that maybe using your strategy, which you just said, which was, splitting a raise, taking part of it and rewarding yourself a little bit, but taking that other part, maybe that's something that you can add towards your debt, right? Is that maybe a good idea?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, we're all different, so you got to think it through. And I think if you take the right step forward, and there's a balancing act in there somewhere. But that is one thing that people do quite often is they ignore their debt. That story I was telling you about spring break, I remember having to come home after that semester, and man, I didn't realize how much credit card debt I rolled up. My car was involved in an accident, so I had to fix it, and I had to go to the bank and get a loan, and there was my first experience in just already starting life off backwards from just poor choices and not paying attention to debt. So you can't ignore it. It's part of it. So what do you do with it? So just make sure that if you do get raises, if you do have a little extra money, that you go through your progressions. I mean, obviously we want to put a little bit in checking in order to pay the bills, but we have to have a game plan to reduce or eliminate debt on a schedule that fits. And if we don't watch it, it'll become a hole that we can never get out of.
I just want to add to what Jeff is saying. So if you understand the rule of money, the rule of 72, which tells you how many years your money will double. So if you get 10% earnings on any investment, you divide 10 into 72, that's 7.2 years that your money, $1 will become $2. Well, that works the same way as debt. If you got to pay a 10% credit card interest rate, then that means your debt is doubling every 7.2 years. If you got a credit card that's 18%, then that means your debt is going to double every 4 years. So that's how fast you're spinning down a hole. So paying a lot of people pay the minimum payments for their credit cards, but they don't realize they're actually digging a hole every month. And I can't encourage more that people really just working on having a game plan to get out of debt is the most important thing on a schedule that works for you.
Well, and so I'm just going to throw it out there. You guys have helped people do this before and help them come up with a plan to eliminate debt. So I'm just going to ask you right now, can we, give the audience a phone number or, email address or something? If this is something they're struggling with or they're thinking about, hey, I could probably use a better plan than I've got right now. I'm just making those minimum payments like you were talking about. Do you guys have some resources that you can share with the audience? Answer
is yes. And debt is important in a financial plan.
Yeah, but Jose, I've also heard you say that you can't it's not just like you make a plan and then that's the answer, right? I mean, it's an ongoing process, right?
We're going to go back to not having a game plan. I mean, if you don't have a game plan, they always say that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So there's no doubt. Can you imagine going to New York City and not having a map and just deciding to go through Florida and Georgia and whatever the case may be? So, but definitely not having a game plan and not prioritizing. I mean, I think that we may have 10 or 12 goals that we want to accomplish, but you got to prioritize those goals. Which one's the most important to the second, to the third? And I think not prioritizing your goals and having different a different game plan for different goals, I think causes you to make a lot of mistakes too.
Yeah, but Jose, I've also heard you say that you can't just. It's not just like you make a plan and then that's the answer, right? I mean, it's an ongoing process, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. As you go through life, things change. Health changes. Your marital status changes. You may have kids. You may get a raise. All these things change, and how like Jeff covered earlier. How do you handle your wants and needs? And but yes, it's a prioritizing those goals and know where you're going really, really makes it easier.
Yeah, and you got certain milestones that you hit. I mean, at some point, we got enough in checking and savings. All right, now what do we do with the extra money we have every month? All right, let's start snowballing debt. Okay, good. Now we've got it down. Now what's next? Okay, now let's build up a good, healthy 6 months worth of expenses in an emergency fund. Okay, great. All right, now let's start catching up and saving for retirement. Well, wait. What do we want retirement to look like? How much will we need? Well, how much do we need to save? And you'll think that through. And then, all right, now that that's taken care of, do I want to make sure my kids and their college is taken care of? Okay, well, how much do I need to save there? But everything goes in order. And if you can start with checking, then reducing, eliminate debt, building an emergency reserve, then start saving for the future, the reality is life just changes. So you have to adapt. You got to reset and try to do it at least once a year and just create a new plan for you and your family based on the things that are important.
And I would have to say, as I get older, things change in my life, and things that I thought were important to me is not as important to me today. And I enjoy traveling. I enjoy spending time with friends and family and creating events, and those things are important. And I think that just is a natural flow of life that things do change. So you always got to keep monitoring, tweaking, and prioritizing as you get older, and because things will change. That's a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know on the last podcast, we talked about the good financial habits, good behaviors to have. And one of the things that you talked about we spoke about was, setting those goals and having a plan. It kind of removes some of the emotion out of what's going on in the moment when we have volatility in the market, things like that. So as far as, bad financial habits, I'm assuming just reacting emotionally is going to be a bad habit.
Your emotions is probably the worst thing that we all have, especially any kind of financial decisions, because most of the time we're making those decisions based off of fear, greed. But, the more we can take the emotions out of the equation, then we're taking logical, very objective steps in whatever those are for the financial well-being and the future of really all of us. So part of that is the more you can create a plan for the future, the more you can stick to it, non-emotional. And the more you create a plan for the future, the less knee-jerk reactions and jumping in and jumping out of every headline we see, especially in this day of 24-hour news. So, the more objective, non-emotional we can become, the better all the way around.
No, I was gonna say things that have always been important to me is talking about money with the whole family. Not talking about money. I mean, think about it. I mean, the challenges that you have, what you're thinking. If you share that with your kids, that teaches them about money and how to look at things. And I think that's so important. So a common mistake would be not talking about money.
So let me ask you this, Jose. I'm gonna jump in real quick, because how do you begin that conversation? So many of us grew up with families, or like my parents, they never spoke to me about money. It was always, it wasn't like it was secretive, but I think that they thought they didn't want to stress me out. We didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, and it was tight here and there. And I think that they didn't want to stress us kids out, but I really never learned a good foundational lesson about finances because we didn't talk about money. So how do you help people start that conversation, Jose?
Well, it's funny. I think that what really helps us through the years, and is Jeff mentioned earlier, both of our parents are deaf mutes. And so we always had to speak for our parents, and we were always involved with the electric bill, with the negotiating rent, speaking for them at whatever, purchase goods, whatever the situation was. And I think that understanding how the money came in and where it went, and living on a budget. I mean, there was at times we were just living on $600 a month. So in our lives, everything's possible. So it's not. So it depends what paradigm that you're coming from. But I just know that talking about it with your family, the truth will set you free. And I remember when Jeff was a kid, and I said, "What do you expect from me as a brother?" And he would give me a list. And I said, "Well, what do I have a right to expect from you as a brother?" And he gave me a list. So we made a list and kind of signed an agreement together that we both understood each other's expectations. Nice. And I think you could do that with your kids. You can do it with your spouse. I mean, your spouse has a right to expect things from you, but you have a right to expect things from her. And I think if you have those clearly defined, I think that, how do you exceed expectations if you don't know what they are?
Right.
So we can't assume that everybody's the same. And I do love this one program called Growing Kids God's Way, where they was talking about love languages and gift giving and acts of service and touching. And it's a great little worksheet, but you actually understand each other's love languages. And I think that not talking about that with your family, and what's funny, you mentioned about a lot of generations that don't share money with their kids. They're actually saying, "I don't trust my kids." So I guess sometimes you can have a problem where your kids don't trust you back. But if you're open about money and how it works and the challenge that you have and what you're thinking about, I just think it causes relationship. You just become closer in your relationship with your family.
Yeah, and you don't have to go through, and you don't have to share, every detail about money. But I think what's important is the thought process, the wisdom, how to approach a situation or a financial decision, whether it's a vehicle or a house or a rental piece of property or some kind of investment, and then just sharing, all right, what do you see? All right, well, here's what I see. Here's what I'm looking at. Here's why I'm looking at it this way. And there's kind of those experiences, and your thought process is what you're trying to convey to that next generation.
Well, I've got a perfect example, and it piggybacks us off of something you guys said earlier, is that my parents never, and my wife's parents never talked to her about an emergency fund. What is an emergency fund? I'd never heard that phrase before I was probably in my mid-30s. But you guys have talked about it pretty openly. What I want to ask is, obviously, not having an emergency fund or emergency savings is a bad habit. It can be a detriment to you. But I want to ask you, more importantly, what's your rule of thumb on what an emergency fund should be?
Well, the rule of thumb is actually 90 to 180 days of your monthly expenses you should have in a checking account, money market account, or savings account. And it's going to be, things are going to happen. Your car's going to break down, your water heaters, something's going to happen. But or reasons. You got to cover a deductible or whatever. You just don't want to, you want to have a bucket of money that you could grab for emergencies that you can get your hands on quickly without having to go use your credit cards and get in debt. So to be proactive, that first bucket is so important. And that emergency fund is probably the biggest mistake that people make by mixing their emergency fund with their retirement plan, or mixing their emergency fund with their other investments, and you just can't get your hands on that quickly, so you have to force sell something or whatever the case may be.
Well, I know we're getting low on time here, and I don't want to wrap this up without all the bases being covered. Is there anything else we need to talk about as far as bad habits?
I'm going to say one very important thing. There's a lot of people that don't participate in their company retirement plans because they just don't understand it. But if a company's going to match any part of it, you got to take advantage of it. And there are a lot of Americans out there that do not participate in their 401ks because they just don't understand it and they're scared to ask.
Yeah, and it's funny that you said that. This is happening in my family right now. My daughter's changing jobs, and she is going from a job that she had no type of retirement. She's 22 years old. There was no type of 401k or anything with that company. And the company she's going to, she's actually getting around a $4.50 an hour raise to go to that company, which is super exciting. And they have a 401k. And I had this conversation with her. Look, this is a big raise for you, right? The $4.50 raise is huge. I'm talking to her. Look, you've got to max that sucker out. Whatever the match is, get it up there because you're not going to miss the money, right? And again, I think when somebody starts a job, you're absolutely right. If they take advantage of it from the start, they won't even miss it in their paycheck because they never got it in the first place.
So true to so many people that we have that are very wealthy because they started early. They took advantage of the opportunity. If they didn't know, they asked a lot of questions. But they found out, and they took it. Like you said, you can adjust your life whichever way, up or down. But I would say another mistake is procrastination, and not asking questions. That's probably the most common.
Jeff, any closing thoughts from you today?
No, if I could just encourage everyone to call time out. I see that procrastination is a big one. We can always do it tomorrow, all right? It's important, but it's not urgent. Oh, I'll get to it. Next thing you know it, a year goes by, 3 years goes by, 5 years goes by. And the longer we wait, the more expensive it is to save for anything. So if I can just encourage people to, hey, let's call time out. Let's shut our eyes. Let's think through what we want out of life, what the goals are, what we're trying to accomplish. And then let's take a reality check. All right, where are we today? Where do we want to be? Where's the gap? Are we on track? Are we not? Okay, what do I need to do or change or alter what I'm doing today in order to create a path to be on track?
Well, I want to challenge the audience right now because if you heard yourself in any of these examples like I did, at least the history of what we've done in the past, whether it's not having the right emergency savings fund or maybe you're not taking advantage of the 401k as well as you maybe think you should. Again, all of this is part of a plan that these guys have talked about many, many times. But if any of these things resonated with you and you want to reach out, I know the guys would be more than happy to chat with you and say, hey, how can we get you out of some of these bad financial habits and put you in the good ones? Please, by all means, reach out. So, Jeff and Jose, what's the best way to reach out to your office?
Best way to contact us would be, of course, you can go to the website, www.felicianofinancial.com, or call us at a toll-free number, 800-436-1213. And if you're in Texas, 903-533-8585. And we've got a lot of material inside the website that you can look around and just, download what's important to you.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet. Enjoyed it always.
Love it. Thank you.
You bet. And of course, our last thank you always goes to your listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Live Life on Purpose podcast with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when the guys come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Feliciano Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live life on purpose.
Thank you for listening to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Feliciano Financial Group. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities offered through Lion Street Financial, LLC, LSF, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Lion Street Advisors, LLC.